the case elsewhere that it's used. It's just all it's saying in Genesis 7 is this entire region that you're under is being flooded, and that's exactly the point of the Persian Gulf.
Well, let me just read it to you from the King James. Genesis 7, verse 18. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered.
Yeah.
15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth. This is not a local flood, Richard, or Robert. I mean, this is a worldwide flood. Now, I don't care what Hebrew scholar you're reading. I don't care.
No, not at all. Because
nobody has seen this Hebrew
Ken,
you're talking about.
Ken, what you've done is
there are thousands of samples of Hebrew language.
Ken,
yes.
You've isolated the text. If you were to read verse 19 just the way it is, ignoring the positioning of when humans were migrating to, the type of animals, the species in the region, and so on. If you just read verse 19 alone, yeah, you could read it as a global flood.
Well, and verse 20 and 21. All flesh died that moved upon the earth. That's verse 21.
Right. Earth here being very generic. But if you want to mention a complete globe, guess what? You'd have to use the word Tevel. And guess what? Tevel is used elsewhere in the Old Testament. The fact that Tevel doesn't appear in the Genesis narrative means it's not a global flood.
You're missing the point. I can
because
read it very
doesn't
clearly in English. I read English very well, okay? The waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills under the whole heaven were covered.
Yeah.
What part of that don't you understand?
Robert, why don't you explain what you mean by generic, or like you mean land? Why don't you explain that?
Yeah. So arets just means it. I could say my garden is the arets, or I could say if I really wanted to stretch it, I could say the back in Australia, like this extensive piece of land, this real estate is arets. Notice I'm not giving any particular geometrical perspective to the word, because the word can't do that. If you want to give it a geometrical perspective as to, I'm speaking about literally everything, you use the word Tevel. The Psalm 24 here, when the Hebrew scribe, or in this case the psalmist, wants to establish what he's saying theologically, so he says, the earth and everything in it exists for the Lord. But notice, arets can be very generic. So when he uses the word Tevel, so the Tevel, the world, and those who live in it, now he's establishing, you're talking about the entire planet. The fact that Tevel doesn't appear in Genesis 7 showcases arets in that context. So you can't just isolate verse 19 specifically in Genesis 7 and suggest, oh, this means it's a global flood. You've completely ignored what I mentioned earlier about the migration of humans, the type of species of animal at the time, the size of the ark, the positioning of the fact that the water is 22.5 feet. You've ignored all that data and you've isolated this verse. Go ahead.
Kent, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I understood you clearly, and I completely reject it, Robert. It's not just verse 19. All of chapter 7 of Genesis, all flesh died that moved upon the earth, verse 21. All in whose nostrils was the breath of life that was in the dry land died, verse 22. Every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping things, fowl of the heaven. They were destroyed from the earth. Noah only remained alive, and they with him in the ark. Verse 24, and the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. You're telling me the Persian Gulf region is going to stay underwater for 150 days, and it's not going to run off anywhere. Water runs off. You have a flood, it doesn't last for 150 days like that. I don't know where you got this stuff. But you need to get your money back for that education.
The curious thing about Genesis 8 is that it says that the waters, when it says that a wind came and basically cleared off the waters, that actually would work on a flat plain. And the Persian Gulf is exceedingly flat. Secondly,
It
when you
doesn't say that. Again, you're not reading from a right Bible. In Genesis 8, it says, God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark, and God made a wind pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. It does not say dried up. It says they assuaged. Verse 3.
Yeah,
And the waters returned from off the earth continually.
I'm talking about movement and evaporation of water. But notice here, King James.
No, it's not talking about evaporation. You're adding that. It says it assuaged. The waters dropped or sank down. The whole crust of the earth would shift positions.
Not at all. The physics doesn't denote that at all. The Japanese tsunami suggests that the global flood model is impossible. But let me just
let's let the audience hear that one more time. The Japanese tsunami says the global flood is impossible.
Yes,
that's what you're saying.
Yeah, because what happened with the fault?
You really believe this stuff, don't you?
Yeah,
you said earlier,
I'm a physicist. It works.
You said earlier, birds obviously are dinosaurs. You really believe that, Robert?
Yeah, the Bible teaches that. Like I was about to show you.
The Bible teaches that birds are dinosaurs. Where did you get this information?
In Genesis 1 verse 20, because in Genesis 1:20 it says that the waters will bring forth reptiles and winged creatures, birds. And Basil.
Actually, interestingly, that's even more clear in the KJV. Like in the modern translations, it doesn't really come out.
Okay, guys.